Hello, this is Lucas Mix joining you from Redmond, Washington. I am delighted to be here, even though I can't be present in person. I am speaking for the SOCIA 2020 conference on Can Astrobiology Transcend Biology? Currently, I am affiliated with organismic and evolutionary biology at Harvard, ECLIS at the University of Durham, and the Ronin Institute. Evolution is inherently a branching process. Whenever I see biology described as a monotonic or linear process, I suspect non-evolutionary thinking. Physics and chemistry encourage us to think in straight lines and simple curves whenever possible. Even in astrobiology, we can think about the brightness of the sun, the loss of atmosphere, and the loss of radiogenic material as monotonic trends. We default to simple explanations. Biology, however, rarely works this way. The issue is particularly important because natural philosophers did think of biology as linear for millennia. Folk biology defaults to an ascending scale from lower to higher organisms, simplicity to complexity, and the lower worth, literally pond scum, to higher worth organisms. More evolved remains code for moral and intellectual superiority. The medieval Scala Naturae, or ladder of nature, showed an ascending staircase of living beings, an eternal hierarchy of sophistication and value, though it's worth noting that humans were not on the top step. With the rise of modern science, the range of living things was reimagined, first as an unrolling scroll, in Latin, an evolution of changing species, slowly revealing more and more. And later, this became viewed as a tree growing upward with humans at the top. Even when branching was recognized, as in this tree of Ernst Haeckel's, the line from root to humans was almost always seen as the trunk of the tree. A remnant of this remains in descriptions of plants and animals as crown eukaryotes. Progressive evolution remains a popular way of thinking, and humans on top remains a popular way of thinking about biology. Molecular biology revealed a much more complex tree of life, one in which humans represent only one successful strategy in a diverse biosphere. One of Darwin's key insights was to view change through time as a process of non-intentional interactions between a population and a local environment. In the early 19th and 20th centuries, biologists came to describe this process as random, or more technically, stochastic. The tree grows not upward, but outward, and is always viewed in terms of populations. Biological trends reflect population minima, maxima, and averages changing through time, as well as populations dividing and sometimes coming together. Variation expands and contracts, but throughout all of this, we are always dealing with populations. And while genes record the long history of interactions between populations and environments, they also change continuously in response to current conditions. I'm betting all of you are familiar with the flatten the curve diagram, a clear example of population thinking. This stochastic view of evolution is at odds with progressive evolution, popular historically, and still common in popular understanding. In an argument made famous by Stephen Jay Gould, we see that organisms on average have gotten more complex with time, chiefly because they varied and could not become less complex. Maximal complexity, along with maximal size, intelligence, and social interaction, have increased. But variation has increased immensely as well, and the median may not have changed all that much. Biological thinking is population thinking. A population within a stable environment can gradually become better and better adapted to that environment. Terms like adaptation, selection, and survival of the fittest can lead people to think that the process really does improve the population in an important and abstract way. It can be easy to miss, however, this is always context specific. When the environment changes, the target for adaptation changes as well. There are no universal adaptations, only local adaptations. This has two important consequences related to within population diversity and related to environmental dependence. I have noticed a common default among astrobiologists, particularly those with backgrounds in physics, astronomy, and engineering. Arguing from trends in human population and technology from roughly 1700 to 1975, they argue for exponential or at least linear growth into the indefinite future. Common examples appear in discussions of the Kardashev scale, the Great Filter, and the singularity. The current trend has been called the Great Acceleration and closely associated with discussions of the Anthropocene. David Grinspoon, among others, has pointed out the dangers of extrapolating into the future. In Earth in Human Hands, he refers to this as the inevitable expansion fallacy. I am in complete agreement with his critique. Echoing Sagan and arguments from the Club of Rome in the 60s and 70s, he points out the existential threats we face precisely because of our increasing population, technology, and power. I don't think he goes far enough, however, particularly when speaking of a Sapiezoic aeon. Grinspoon still suggests exponential growth as a default. He simply recognizes that we have a choice between this and extinction. This appears most clearly when he presents technological advances as irreversible changes. As a biologist, I think we have far more options. We need to think of Homo sapiens as a population with a variable variability, capable of complex strategies for dealing with change in the environment and competing amongst ourselves. Natural selection can, and often does, cultivate variation within a population. In a variable environment, this allows some members of the species to be suited for every circumstance. Even in a stable environment, it may be useful to have a variety of individuals whose traits complement one another. Bees provide a great example. Most of us are familiar with bee eusociality, with reproductive specialization and different castes. Our genome produces a variety of phenotypes depending on one genome in the bees produces a variety of phenotypes depending on environmental and social conditions. Curiously, only 1 in 10 bee species are reliably eusocial in this way. Most are not, and a few respond to their environments, only becoming eusocial under certain circumstances of climate and resource availability. They also form a variety of different sizes of colonies depending on local conditions. Space travel will radically alter the human species. If we leave the planet Earth, we will be living in a new environment, likely many new environments. We should expect the population to change in response to those environments, becoming more diverse and variable, even if we do not develop castes, quasi-independent populations, or competing subgroups. The bad news is this makes prediction terribly difficult. The good news is we have options for how we will develop as a species. Some evolution will be constrained by our environment, but some will be shaped by the choices we make along the way. These choices will only be possible if we recognize a wide variety of possibilities. I worry that many representations of human futures draw on pre-evolutionary narratives. Discussions of intelligence and technology remain fundamentally progressive, even when admitting of an off-ramp for self-destruction. In denying the branchy stochastic character of evolution, they rob us of one kind of agency, that is, agency regarding our population structure, while highlighting another, usually framed as dominance over nature. We should give careful thought to possibilities for more and less diversity within one population, and the possibility of division between populations, as both of these processes have occurred regularly for successful species such as bees, as they expand into multiple habitats. The linearity and irreversibility of the progressive narrative presents a picture profoundly different from the evolutionary narrative of stochastically changing populations. It can also obscure the variety of human cultures and differing views of progress that are so important to post-colonial and anti-racist views of morality. Biologists from Alfred Russel Wallace to Richard Dawkins have, explicitly and implicitly, allowed intelligence to counter natural selection, to be a competing force. I think that this represents an attempt to sneak human exceptionalism and Enlightenment dualism back into the scientific discussion. I'm happy to speak of alternative pictures in philosophy and theology. I need not be a reductionist, but I want to be clear that these ideas are not a product of biology, but a radically non-biological view of separation between the way that minds work and the way that bodies work. It would be more responsible, both biologically and ethically, I believe, to speak of intelligence as an evolved trait that works within the confines of natural selection, and thus is amenable to these same population processes as the other traits that I have discussed so far. I have decided to focus on branching as opposed to linear narratives of human change, thinking in terms of populations and diversity. In science fiction, the diversity narratives of Wells, Huxley, and Le Guin are just as well established as the progressive narratives of Asimov, Roddenberry, and Sagan. RUR and Westworld are both thinly veiled commentaries on human differentiation based on labor and the conflict that it can create. In evolutionary terms, populations benefit from having a range of intellectual abilities, and in a similar vein, a range of moral dispositions. Evolution does not select for humans of phenomenal altruism or intelligence, but it can select for highly diverse populations, including a rare saint or super genius. More importantly, it can select for populations that pursue intelligence and morality in diverse ways. Like bees and countless other groups, evolutionary success is likely to lead to diversity, both within and between species, as well as gene expression that varies with our environment. We should not fall into the trap of thinking that natural stochastic evolution will be miraculously replaced by intelligent design of the human variety. Technology will have a profound impact on the species. Selection can occur far more rapidly than it has in the past, though it should be noted that the growing size of our population has a slowing effect, and as the human population gets bigger, natural selection will proceed more slowly. Artificial intelligence, synthetic biology, and space travel will all change the way we change as a group, but there's no reason to believe that it will be a linear or monotonic process. It will continue to be dependent on habitat and population, as branchy and random as other forms of evolution. For more on this topic, I am happy to recommend several books that I have read recently. On the Great Acceleration, the Inevitable Expansion Fallacy and the Sapiezoic, David Grinspoon's book, Earth in Human Hands. On intelligence and evolutionary change as the ongoing product of interaction between a population and an environment, David Haig has written a very sophisticated take on this, particularly looking at the way intelligence and signaling might arise due to natural selection. That is From Darwin to Derrida. On astrobiology and the essential embeddedness of human nature, that is our dependence on our Earth context. Adam Pryor has written a lovely book on theology and astrobiology called Living with Tiny Aliens. And on the presentation of a homogeneous humanity in space and how that can perpetuate racism, Douglas DeWitt Kilgore's book, Astrofuturism, is a classic. Thank you. Thank you to David Haig at Harvard, Joanna Masel at the University of Arizona, and David Wilkinson at Durham University for institutional support and conversation. Thank you to Catherine Denning for helping me think through what aspects of this question were most important to me. And of course, thank you to Kelly Smith, John Trefagan, and Sosha for putting all of this together. I look forward to talking with you more during the discussion.